seems like no matter which state I'm in, I get this question about like, well, how are you going to recruit students away from private schools as if all private schools are perfect and all other school choices are less than. And it's a bit of a psychological conundrum, if that makes sense, because it's just not true. I mean, yes, there are some private schools that are, they catch me out. They're totally the best option locally. And then in other places, the public schools are the best option, absolutely, hands down, et cetera, et cetera. It all depends, right? But we do assume as Americans that private schools are just better on their face than public schools. It's not true, but I'm going to break it down. I'm going to do this in a two-part series. The first part, I'm going to get into like the why we do this, and then in part two, I'm going to break down the data and kind of dispel these very common myths. But I'll say it to you this way: it's very akin to the way we elect people. The best candidate wins. The best candidate is not always the best legislator, not always the best person in that office, but man, do they interview well. And we actually started a bit of a philosophy around here. I don't want to share too many secrets, but if somebody comes in and they just interview fantastic, they're great, get a little suspect. Maybe they've learned to get by on having really great interviews, but is there substance behind them? Are they really doing what they say can do, or is it just the appearance? Well, we all get kind of snookered left and right about this. So sometimes better, sometimes they're not. Because the belief doesn't begin with data. It doesn't begin with facts. It usually begins with what psychologists often refer to as a mental shortcut, right? It begins with like anchoring bias is what we call it. And once that you're anchored in a particular position, a particular belief system, everything gets filtered through that belief system. I mean, we just get anchored in a certain number. And I think I've shared this before, but it's like anchoring bias is so interesting because in negotiations, a lot of people say, well, never give the first number. No. Give the first number. If it's within the realm of reality and it's not just totally bizarre when you're negotiating for something, you're anchoring the other side in a plus or minus of that particular number. So let's say you want to buy a car. The car is listed at, I don't know, $50,000. A lot of money for a car. And you're going to make an offer. Well, you go in and you say, I'd like to offer you $37,000. Well, that's too less. We're not going to take that, But they also know they're not going to get 50 anymore. But if you walk in and you say, I'll do 47, they're going to think they can get you up to 50 because you anchored them in a higher number. So two psychologists, Tversky and Kahneman, and everyone knows about my speech impediments. I'm sorry, but Kahneman is Kahneman. I can't spell sometimes. But they wrote about judgment under certainty that they described on how people relied on heuristics or mental shortcuts when making judgments. And one of those is the anchoring bias. And the basic idea is simple. Any label, reputation, first impressions, this is why first impressions matter. Like we've heard that first impressions matter because you're anchored in that first impression, like it or not, bad or good. And it really pulls your judgment later on. And it's so hard to untangle those first impressions, right? Because even if we've learned that they're not right, we still penalize people for that prior judgment. So this matters here with schools because Americans are introduced to private schools with a very powerful set of anchors. Tuition, well, if it costs money, it must be good. Exclusivity, well, if exclusive and it's behind the red rope, it must be better. Uniforms, very civilized, very organized. Smaller class assumptions. People, well, we have smaller classes. Can't find the data that shows smaller class sizes increase student outcomes. Sorry, it's a belief. I think a lot of people believe that you're going to get more personal attention, but when you get these smaller class sizes, you also lose a lot of ancillary services that you can't count for in smaller class size. So we give you the number, smaller class size, but they don't have a psychologist, they don't have a nurse, they don't have teacher assistants. You got to get your own transportation. There's a lot of other things that go with that, right? But prestige language, emission standards, college prep branding. I mean, how many charter schools? College prep, Montessori school, college prep. Like we're prepping them for college. Well, man, like any school can prep your kid for college if that's the path they're going on. May prep them for the army, may prep them for trade school, whatever. That's cool, but we branded it as college preparatory school because it just feels so good, right? And often really a social reputation that says, this is where serious families go. And they're very powerful anchors. And once that anchor is set in our mind, people do not come to the question neutral anymore. They begin with the assumption that private must be better. And from there, they start interpreting everything through that lens. This is not an education problem. This is a huge human judgment problem. And it happens all the time. I mean, I got to say, we got schnooked into this when we were two young lawyers and we had a baby girl. And we still had some law school debt and stuff, but we had a few nickels. We were generating a little bit of money at that point. And what do? You send your kid to private school because you want the best for them. What a train wreck that turned out to be. I mean, from our own personal opinion, I'm going to get into the data. Don't worry, but I got to tell you a story first, which is, man, we did it, and the first one they were okay. I don't know if it was any better than local elementary schools. We didn't have that experience, but I knew people's children that did, and they all seemed to kind of turn out about the same, plus or minus. But then we moved to another private school for middle school. Total train wreck. I'm telling you, they were racist. They were discriminatory. They had their little pets, their little favorites. Typically, people that get big checks. I thought the tuition was enough, but it wasn't enough. And it was a very good, old boys club. And by the way, where's the first place that my daughter was exposed to pictures she shouldn't be exposed to? Private school. Where was the first place that she was exposed to? Drugs. Private school. I'm not suggesting she wasn't going to be exposed to those at other types of schools. Inevitably, she would have been maybe the exact same year in the exact same way. But it's the belief that the kid's safer, more protective, and more innocent in the private school. That wasn't our experience. The data is going to come out the same way. Trust me, that's called a tease, right? So what's happened in the real world is that these parents hear that a school is private and costs money before they've ever looked at teacher quality or whether or not a teacher is even certified teacher. Okay, so they don't look. They don't care. It costs money. Must be better. There is an old acronym that I heard this with business people. When they hire a lawyer, the rich folk want the most expensive lawyer. They don't say the best lawyer. I've heard billionaires and 100 millionaires say this often. I want the most expensive lawyer. Why are you most expensive? Because they're the best. I mean, they must be. Because they charge the most. And that little number is an indicia of success to them. So they radiate around them. I've heard family members say, I want to hire the most expensive one. Man, so I just should increase my rates. I'm the most expensive attorney, but it doesn't mean I'm the best. I just charge more. I mean, could be the best, but a lot of cases they're not, right? So because it costs money, it must be better. And the more it costs, the better the education. I got to pause on that. It just makes me, anyway. So this is before they've looked at academic growth, discipline practices, special education capacity, anything. The word private just lands in that in that kind of that mind's eye of luxury. That's how it lands. And the brain starts filling the blanks. Expensive, selective, better, safer, more serious, more late. No data based on that. Not one bit of data, but it feels good, right? And I know it would be better if we weren't led by our emotions, but we are. All of us are human animals and we're all led by our emotions. And I told this story more times. It's like the perfect vehicle for Brian Stevens is a vehicle that I hold all my bike gear. It gets decent gas mileage, I guess. I don't, if I drive, it's whatever it is. But I can pack all my stuff and it's comfortable. It's a minivan, man. A minivan is a perfect vehicle. I can't do it. Emotionally, I cannot be a minivan driver. I gotta drive truck. Gotta drive truck. It's not the best vehicle for me. It's the emotionally best fit for me. So you look outside at what you're driving or what you want to drive and you tell me you're not led by emotions, man. All right. Because, we're led by emotions. We use facts to defend our position often, but let's kind of keep going. All right. So let's get into the second major idea is that people are led by feelings first and facts and data second. So one of the most useful studies here is this 2000 paper by Melissa Funakane, and I hate pronouncing names because it's really hard, and Paul Slavic, and Stephen Johnson. And it was what's called the effect heuristic. And these researchers were interested in how people judge the risk and benefits of different activities and technologies. Instead of assuming that people carefully they carefully weigh pros and cons like statisticians, like engineers. They tested whether people often rely on fast overall emotional impressions and then let the feelings guide the judgment, right? So people like to say, I'm led by the data, the facts. And they're like, but are you led by emotions? Let's test it in a study, right? And the study's been duplicated, by the way. So it's bulletproof. But here's the study. Picture it. Participants were asked to evaluate different things and rate how risky they were and how beneficial they were. So how much benefit could you get and how risky would be this if you try to get it. The researchers also included a condition with time pressure because they wanted to see what would happen when people had even less opportunity to slow down and reason carefully, which happens to us all the time as individuals. Fast decisions. Oftentimes, we're just not given the time to really process things. So they wanted to put that time pressure on. And if people were doing a purely analytical comparison, risk and benefit judgment should have been more independent, right? But that's just not what happened. The researchers found a strong inverse relationship that when people felt positively about something, they tend to rate it as high in benefit and low in risk. But when they felt negatively about something, they tended to rate it as high in risk and low in benefit. And that pattern remained even when they were rushed. Okay. So what do people say is they'll say, let me simplify this a little bit just for my own sake, which is they're saying, well, if I had more time to think about it, I'd make a better decision. That's not what the studies are saying. The studies are still saying that you're going to be led with your anchoring bias and your emotions, and then you're going to use facts to justify it. Happens all the time. Take my truck. Wanted a truck instead of a minivan because I'm going to haul some mulch and I'm going to move some stone and things I almost never do, right, with my truck. And I mean, I do a little towing, but it's safer. It's a safer vehicle, and all these other things that we use to justify our decisions. So the issue with the time pressure is important because even when you were given more time or less time, like time is like make a decision fast. If you rated it ahead of time as thinking it was a positive thing, you're gonna believe that it has more benefits than risk. Anchoring bias, right? That's kind of like when you have favorite people in your life. Well, they're a good person. My impression, they would not do this. And you get very defensive about people that have done good over and over again. Doesn't mean a person that's done good over and over again can't make a mistake and do something bad. And so we're really blind to that. Take our children, for instance. Our children have never done anything wrong. Oh my God, how dare you say that about my babies? Man, my daughter is awesome sauce. It doesn't mean she can't be a little jerk. It doesn't mean she can't be a pain. Don't worry, she doesn't listen to this podcast. And it doesn't make you a bad person, but that is true sometimes, right? And I see this a lot when we were coaching schools and districts, like how to deal with like tense situations like bullying. The parents of the bullier always defend the bullier. You can smell it on the kid. This kid's a bullier. My child would never do that. I am anchored in believing my child is a good person. Maybe they are a good person, but it doesn't mean they didn't bully somebody. And, it's kind of funny, isn't it? That the bullier is always the one that claims that they're being bullied first. I've seen this over and over again. Sorry. So there's really enormous insights for education because of these factors, right? Because when many people hear the word private school, they do not just think one thought. They experience a cluster of feelings again: prestige, order, sacrifice, investment, exclusivity, morale. All these things drive their decision. And then they're going to infer that all those feelings mean it's going to be a more effective, aka a better education. And now I want to be careful here because this does not mean that parents are foolish. It doesn't mean this one bit. It means parents are human. It means we're all human. That when people are making high-stake decisions for children, especially decisions tied to fear, hope, identity, status, they become even more vulnerable to emotional shortcuts. And the choice does not feel abstract. It feels moral, right? It feels protective. It feels very personal. And when a decision feels personal and emotion, it becomes even more powerful. And the broader literature that Slovic and his colleagues were developing on the effect heuristic makes exactly this point. In real human decision-making, feeling is often not a side issue. It's the central theme of the decision. And we do it throughout our lives, right? So now let me give you like an analogy, because sometimes people understand psychology faster when it's like outside of education or outside of the room, outside of the experience that we're in. So in 2008, a study by Robin Goldstein and colleagues asked a very deceptively simple question. Ooh, get ready. I love this one. Do more expensive wines actually taste better when people don't know the price? And they used a very large sample size of blind testings of more than 6,000 observations, which in study universe is a lot of observations, right? You can do a statistical analysis with 400. So they did 6,000, right? From US testing, and they involved hundreds of participants, hundreds of wines. And the key feature was that these were blind tastings, meaning the tasters did not know what they were drinking when they rated it. And this matters because it strips away brand reputation, price cues, and prestige signals. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about what those prestige signals are on wine because I thought it was interesting. What did they find though? On average, when people did not know the price of the wine, more expensive wines were not rated any more favorably. In fact, among non-experts, the relationship was slightly negative. In other words, once the prestige label was removed, the assumed quality advantage did not hold the way people might expect. The researchers, they did find that really well-trained wine drinkers showed some evidence of a more positive relationship. But for ordinary tasters, ordinary wine drinkers, price did not reliably deliver a better experience when the cues are hidden. And I know somebody goes, well, I can tell the difference. No, you can't. No, you can't. I'm telling you, you can't do it. I've met wine drinkers, man, and we are not the prestige wine drinkers that know. I'm talking about really, really now, look, if you're a super bougie person and you've got, well, I actually know some people that could probably tell the difference. And they have wine rooms. They have like wine, not like 5 bottles sitting around their house or 10 bottles. I mean, like hundreds of bottles. And they are this is their thing. They can tell. But regular people can't. You think you can't. Okay, you can tell the difference between Coke and Pepsi maybe, but not wines. And these prestige labels are so good because they use branding and marketing emotions to drive you. First off, the heavier the bottle, the more expensive it is. The people that produce wine know this, so they make the bottles heavy. Restaurants love it when you order wine because you have no idea what wine really costs. You have no idea. I mean, it's kind of like mattresses. You know, you go to a mattress and you can't check online because the mattress has a different name and they have a different names. They always keep you guessing, like, what's the price of this mattress? Well, this is the Deluxe Queen Apex. And then you go online and it's the Deluxe Apex Plus. And I'm like, what? Is that the same thing? Slightly different description. And they play these games with us because it works on us, right? And so they make the bottles heavy, you know, and in a fancy restaurant, you know, they put a cloth around and oh, mama, would you like to taste it? Would you like this as wine? You know, all these emotional cues to make you feel like you're having a great experience. And I play these games with people. We go out to dinner with a nice, you know, group of people. And it's like, what wine would you like, sir? I go, you're going to start with the cheapest one and we're going to work our way down. I just say it, man. And people are like, cool. Because then they don't feel guilty about drinking too much of it. You know, I guess maybe they should, but they don't know. They don't know. And it's just so funny. My mother thinks she knows. I'm going to do this blind tasting on her. She drinks plenty of wine, but it's just, they fool you with labels and fancy packaging and all this stuff. So people can't tell, but it feels good to drink a really expensive bottle of wine. It feels good. I mean, to some people to say, like, I got literally a $2,000 shot. Like, you can't see me if you're listening to the podcast. I'm doing cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs in my head right now. It's like, can you really taste the difference? I don't need a fancy meal. I need a good burger, you know, but this is the way that we're kind of led here. Okay. So the beauty of this kind of wine analogy is because many people are not evaluating the wine of the actual school. They're evaluating the label on the bottle. Tuition becomes the price cue. Exclusivity becomes the branding cue. Emissions become the scarcity resource. If it's scarce, it must be valuable. And reputation becomes the luxury packaging. And then people tell themselves they are seeing quality, when in many cases, they are just reacting to the signals. Think about in your own life, the signals that you're getting, right? So by the time we get to the public versus private school debate, a lot of people are already not asking fair questions. They're not asking, what does the school actually do? How does it serve different kinds of students? What are the inputs? What are the supports? What are the exclusions? What are the trade-offs? What are the trade-offs? What are the trade-offs? What kind of extracurricular activities do they have? I mean, all this stuff is the culture of education. It's not just the awesome looking stone building that you're walking into. It's a facet that feels good, but it's not everything. It's funny, we were talking about this podcast and my team was delivering me some numbers. I'm like, I don't know what any of these numbers mean. They're all total downloads. You know, I guess that's curious, but it doesn't mean that anybody's downloading it in the past month. It just means total downloads means that a bunch of people maybe downloaded a long time ago. So maybe we're trending off. But that number feels like a big number because it's always rising because every month you're getting new downloads. So, but it makes us feel so good. And I'm just saying feeling good is awesome. I like to feel good, but we got to be afraid of this anchoring effect and how it's shifting opinions incorrectly and we're looking at the wrong things. So public schools are judged while carrying the full weight of the entire public. They serve the child with severe disabilities. They serve the child who just moved. They serve the child learning English, perhaps. They serve the child with trauma, the ones whose parents are deeply involved with issues outside of the child. I'll let you surmise what that is. And parents that are overwhelmed. And they serve the students who are gifted, the students are ahead of the power curve, that are behind the power curve, the student who's homeless, the student who's hungry, the one who's brilliant but disruptive, and it's, where will my child thrive the most? Long term. And of course, as Americans, we don't really think too long term. We kind of think about what's right in front of us. And so that's why this anchoring miss is so scary. The NCES comparison study explicitly addresses the issue by controlling for all these factors. We're going to get into it next podcast. But I think this myth is so dangerous because it allows people to mistake scarcity and money for superiority. So that's kind of the setup for today. I just wanted to frame how we arrive at this bias. There are hundreds of bias that humans have to do to survive. We have to use mental shortcuts. The issue is, how do we uncork those mental shortcuts and try to be a little bit more discerning, or in our case, advertise to the parents around this mental shortcut. They're going to have it. They're going to have their anchor bias. So how do we get them to dispel this anchoring myth, be open to fully learning what all the schools do so they can have a full level choice? We're going to get into the data part 2. All right. Thanks, everybody.